I'm glad to have the chance to do Bible class and a Bible study. I don't know which I like more. Writing sermons and writing Bible classes it's like apples and oranges. The process is different, and I don't know which one's easier and which one's harder. Sometimes it just kind of goes back and forth. But Joe talked about doing a lesson in the Psalms, and I really like that. I really enjoy teaching the Psalms. We're going to look at, if you want to start opening your Bible set, we're going to look at 73 through 83. I don't know what that means. When I say we're going to look at 73 through 83, we'll just see what that kind of means in general. Because there's no way we're going to do them all. We could, I mean, a lazy person could spend the whole time on one psalm. It takes a lot of work to do many, lots of scriptures at once. And 78, smack dab in the middle of it, it's a beauty and it's a huge one. So there's no way we can cover it all. But I like the Psalms. About 15 or 16 years ago, when I was getting into preaching, and I looked at the Psalms and I thought, well, I don't know much about the Psalms. I need to figure these out. And that's the very modern way of looking at things, right? If you don't know it, then just conquer it, figure it out, and master it. And I found out very quickly that I'm not good at poetry, and I wasn't very good at understanding the Psalms. I just couldn't understand them at all. And I decided what I would do in my effort was I would read in a sitting. So like whether it was once a day or a couple times a day. I'm saying this as a good way of all of you engaging in the Psalms. I would read 2 Psalms a day or 2 Psalms a sitting. I would read Psalm 1 and then Psalm 2. And then the next day I would read 2 and then 3, and then 3, 4, 4, 5. So every day I'm reading 2 Psalms. And the first one I read the day before, so I kind of know it already. I read it yesterday. Oh, I remember this. It kind of makes sense a little bit, reading number 3. And then I read Psalm 4, and I go, I have no idea what Psalm 4 is about. And then the next day I read Psalm 4, I go, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of remember that word, but maybe it means something like this. It would kind of stick in my head better. And then I read number 5. I have no idea what 5 is about. And then I get to Psalm 78, which is, how many verses is Psalm 78? Psalm 72 verses. It's 3 sheets of paper the way I printed it out. And so I'd cut that one in half, right? Because I'm trying to be practical. And I'd read, the first half and I wouldn't understand it, but then I would reread it and then I would understand it better. And I went through all the Psalms and I'd start reading them again. I'd get back to Psalm 3. I don't know what that means. Even though I read it however many days ago, I still don't know what it means. But then I'd read it the next day again. I'm like, oh, it's making a little bit more sense. So I don't know if this is depressing or not. After like 16 years of doing this, I feel like I know what they mean when I'm reading them now. And I figured it's taken 16 years to finally understand the Psalm, but over time and reading and rereading and I wasn't doing big studies on each Psalm. I was literally just reading the Psalm, thinking, and then reading the next one. And I recommend that because I think that if there were 50 Psalms, we'd know them all. But God in his infinite wisdom frustrated us by giving us 3 times that number. And so then it's almost like we decide, so we're not going to know them at all because it's just too much and it's too hard. I think just reading and reading and rereading is really good. And so as we're going through, if you have any question about a psalm or you've heard a line before, I don't mind jumping around and hopping off to that. We don't have to stick to that. Yes, Joe.
Ask a question. Have you found any particular good translation that is effective in others? We're doing that.
It's all opinion. So I am going to give you my opinion, but it's all opinion. The only thing there's 2 things I don't like about King James. One, some of the language, some of the vocabulary is just really old, really, really old. But that you can kind of get past that. So if you're rereading the Psalm, then you'll see that word. You looked it up once, you might remember it again. So that's okay. The other thing about King James is I think it still leaves the Psalms in paragraph or the big box prose format rather than having it, where's the Psalms? Rather than like it's paragraph and not poetic form. And it's not necessary to see it in the poetic form, but it's really helpful. Other than that, I love the King James because the King James translation was written to be read aloud. It was written to be heard, not to be no, that sounds bad, not to be comprehended. It's meant to be read aloud and thought of that way. The New American Standard translation of the Bible is a great, accurate translation. When I try to preach from it, my tongue gets stuck every other word. It doesn't flow. I can read King James more easily for some reason. So I like to preach from the English Standard because it flows. So I like the way the King James reads. I found at an estate sale an old Bible that's the RV, which is the revised version. That's what I use, not the RSV, just the RV. It's apparently the grandpa of the American Standard Version. So, but it was from England, and so it has the English King James feel, but the updated textual criticism. And you can't buy it anyway. I just found it. It was like 100 years old when I found it in a basement. So now I print them off on sheets of paper. It's a free online translation. So really, any translation is okay, but try reading it aloud and seeing if it works. And I have liked this RV that's old. It's just worked for me. I know some people like the way the NIV reads. I used to be grouchy about the ESV, but it's been growing on me for the Psalms translation. So it really, to me, it's whatever is your personal taste, I think. Because one of the things, and I got this idea from C.S. Lewis when he's writing about the Psalms, and I like this. Poetry has meter, it has rhythm, and it has often, for most of the time, it's had a rhyming concept to it, which means it can't translate. And some things can translate. You can get the old Norse, the poems that the Vikings read, and since that's Norse and Norse is connected to English, you can get a little bit of that rhythm. You can kind of make it work. It's hard to translate poetry and make it work, but Hebrew poetry didn't have rhymes or rhythm or meter. Instead, they had liked or similar ideas. So instead of rhyming sounds, I say they rhymed ideas. And Amos, for 3 transgressions and for 4. Why didn't you just say for 4 transgressions? Because it sounds better when you say for 3 transgressions and for 4. And it's this mounting. It even sounds like you're galloping in English, at least. So there's those ideas. And so and what's a good example? It's just Psalm 73 verse 1. Surely God is good to Israel, even to such as are pure in heart. God's good to Israel. Do we need to know that he's good to the people that are good in heart? We don't technically have to know that, but it's amping that up. He's good to Israel, to the ones who are pure in heart. That's the Israel. And so it's this repetitive thing. God is good. He does that. And so Hebrew poetry is ideas that rhyme, so to speak, and that can get translated into any language. So God gave us poetry that can fit any language, and I think that that's pretty cool. I like that. Incidentally, I have a podcast that I've been doing for a few years called Reading the Psalms. All I do is I read a psalm, I talk about it a little bit, and then I read it again and have a closing remark. They're usually only about 5 minutes long because psalms are short, mostly. And so if that's a way, if hearing them read is a nice way of entering a psalm, and it's just I just read it 2 times, that's something that might be helpful to you, or you can recommend it to people. It's the Psalms, so it's about as non-denominational as the Bible gets. Sometimes I'll reference Jesus if it's a really strong prophetic connection, but I don't always refer to Jesus in the psalm. I'm just talking about the text of the psalm. And so it's a way that you can introduce people who don't know the Bible or who are grouchy about the Bible or even a denominational friend of yours. And it's just reading a psalm and thinking of those spiritual thoughts. So that's just another thing that's out there. It's just called Reading the Psalms podcast that can be helpful.
It can be on any podcast?
Yeah. Apple, Spotify, think it might be on the Amazon one. That's harder to get onto.
You broadcast that on Facebook too, right?
I posted on Facebook with a link to listen to it somewhere. Yeah. Yeah. I used to copy it to YouTube, but that was an extra step that just took a lot of time, so I don't do that anymore. But yeah, so they're all there. The last time I did Psalm 119, I read the whole thing straight through, so it was a little bit longer of a recording, but I think that can be good. All right, so Psalms 73 through 83. 73 is the beginning of book number 3, if I remember right. And I used to not pay much attention to the books, but I saw in a lesson that there's some neat things that are going on in some of the books. Books 3 and 4 are kind of like the opposite of, is it, I just went blank. 2 Samuel, everything is going good for David until the sin of Bathsheba, and then everything goes down. And so you can kind of see the arc up and down. The Psalms books 3 and 4 are opposite. Book 3 is just slowly declining into this pit where Psalm 88 is, if I remember right, I don't even know if there's any mention of hope in 88. It's pretty dark. And then 89 ends book 3. And then 90 is the Psalm of Moses, help us to know the limitation of our life. And I imagine as he's watching his loved ones die in the desert, it's pretty dark, but there's this image of hoping on God, and it climbs up in the 90s. And there's some really great kingdom psalms and hoping ultimately in Jesus psalms. And so 73 all the way down and then back up to 105, 106. There's this, it goes down and then back up. So it's kind of like your classic Disney story, right? The kid, it's all okay, and then the kid he's an orphan and everything's bad, and it gets to the lowest point, and then he finds out he's a prince or a princess, and things end up good in the end. It's that arc that we can see in those psalms, and it seems like they were put in this order. It seems like for that purpose. 73 is the beginning of it, and 73 through 83 are all psalms of Asaph, or Maskil of Asaph. Asaph is connected to all of them. No one's quite sure who Asaph is. There is an Asaph that is connected to the time of David. Some of the psalms in here seem like they could be Babylonian exile psalms. So it's kind of confusing. Is there one Asaph? Is there several? I just teach it like it's one guy on a journey. I teach it like it's one guy on a journey. And while the overall picture from 73 down and back up is big, Asaph, as he's living through trouble and frustrating times, he wears his heart on his sleeve. He's loud. He's almost sounding as bad as Job kind of sounds at times, where you go, oh boy, turn it down. That's a little bit too much. And he comes to have a lot of respect for God by the time we get long before 83, but I see a neat progression between 73 through 83. I'm just going to go ahead and read, trying to figure out. I'll read all of 73, unless there's somebody who wants to read. You'll get a chance to read a psalm in a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and read 73 and just try to see, what is this Asaph guy like if you met him on the street? So Psalm 73. Surely God is good to Israel, even to such as are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet were almost gone. My steps had well nigh slipped. For I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm. They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. Therefore, pride is as a chain about their neck. Violence covers them as with a garment. Their eyes stand out with fatness. They have more than the heart could wish. They scoff, and in wickedness utter oppression. They speak loftily. They have set their mouth in the heavens, and their tongue walketh through the earth. Therefore his people return hither, and waters of a full cup are wrung out by them. And they say, how does God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the wicked, and being always at ease, they increase in riches. Surely in vain have I cleansed my heart and washed my hands in innocency. For all the day long I have been plagued and chastened every morning. If I had said, I will speak thus, behold, I dealt treacherously with the generation of thy children. When I thought how I might know this, it was too painful for me, until I went into the sanctuary of God and considered their latter end. Surely thou settest them in slippery places. Thou castest them down to destruction. How are they become a desolation in a moment? They are utterly consumed with terrors, and as a dream as one wakes. So, O Lord, when you awake, shalt thou despise their image. For my heart was grieved, and I was pricked in my reins. So brutish was I and ignorant, as I was as a beast before thee. Nevertheless, I'm continually with thee. Thou hast holden my right hand. Thou shalt guide me with thy counsel, and afterward receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven but thee? And there is none upon earth that I desire beside thee. My flesh and my heart fails, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. For lo, they that are far from thee shall perish. Thou hast destroyed all them that go a-whoring from thee. But it is good for me to draw near unto God. I have made the Lord God my refuge, that I may tell all thy works. All right. Asaph was willing to say it like it is. Describe Asaph and be honest. He's honest. What does he sound like to you?
Arrogant.
Arrogant? Yeah. How old does he sound like? Yeah. Yeah. Could be. I think it's interesting. He could be in his 30s and acting like a 17-year-old. I mean, I like joking about how the Israelites in the wilderness were toddlers, no matter what their age was. Yeah, there's a lot of arrogance in there. When he describes the evil people in 4 through 12, is he
He's better than them, right?
there is that. He knows they're bad and he's not that way. So there's that sense of better. But when he describes them, what does he think about them? Like, what do you think about his descriptions of the evil people in 4 through 12? They're not in trouble like others. They're not plagued like others.
Wants to have what they have.
Yeah.
That way without doing that.
Yeah. I want to be a rich movie star. Rich movie stars, they don't have to worry about parking. They don't have to worry about this, They don't have to worry about a mortgage. They've got it easy. All right, so here's an opinion question. Is it true?
Which part you asking? True.
I don't even know which part I'm asking. When he's complaining about them, do you think it's kind of true? Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. It might not be a good way to think. His poem ends with him kind of having some shame about those feelings, but I like the song because whether I should feel that way or not, I know I get that way sometimes. Verse 13 is rough. What does he think in 13?
He said he's kept his motives pure and maintained a pure lifestyle.
And what's his attitude about that?
Says he suffers all day long.
Yeah. There could be some translation differences here. Let me look how it says in ESV.
Being punished every morning.
Yeah. But he says, I think a key word there in verse 13, I've been really good, verse 13, but he adds, in vain have I been really good. What's it worth me? If the movie stars that it's not all movie stars, it's politicians, it's sport, whatever, it's stars, right? They get all the good stuff. And here I am trying to be good. It's been worthless. That's a feeling. It might not be a true reality, but it's definitely a true feeling that we get into. Here I am working my tail off, and the guy at work who's been lazy and he gets the promotion. Like that kind of a feeling. I don't think it's a good thought, but it's a real thought. I think the Psalms are neat that way because they present bad things. It's God's word. And it's like, if you're feeling this way, read through this. Don't gripe in your own words. Let God's words guide you through some of these incorrect thoughts, maybe. So I hand the back.
Yeah, I think you can peg him as being unmarried and probably under the age of 30 and no children. I mean, that's kind of specific, but that view is a view of many young people. Let's say Christians in their early 20s say, man, my friends are having all this fun. This, they're going there. But if you remain as a Christian, that view leaves you.
Yeah.
But never, I'm fairly old. I've never seen an older Christian who ever resented or despised the fact that they made the right decisions.
Yeah,
But I have felt that in
absolutely.
my team.
Absolutely. And so he kind of ages as the psalm progresses, right?
Yeah, he does. Well, and also, he knows enough to know that those thoughts are not good thoughts. And he says,
Yeah.
oh, but here's what I think and what I really should be thinking.
Right.
We do that.
Right. And so
It's the old expression,
Yep.
you can't prevent the birds from flying over your head. You can prevent them from resting in your hair.
yeah,
And you can say, man, I know I should have done that, should have said that, should have thought that. But learn from it and be stronger.
mm-hmm.
I pegged him at about 30.
And see, that's what's like. This is a weird poem written how many thousands of years ago, and we know this guy from sitting next to us at the lunch table in high school or in college or at the office. Like they're pretty intimate that way, especially Asa. I mean, he is just loud, right? Verse 17 is kind of interesting. This is too much. This is too hard. Until I went to the sanctuary of God and considered their latter end. Now, we should not read this. I like to just translate everything from the temple to church because like that's our context. I was bummed out about all those superstars until I went to church and I realized they're all going to die. That's not the way it goes. That's a really trite way. And in 74, it's more clear. But he went to like, what does it mean he went to church or he went to the sanctuary? He considered, he sees what God does. Okay, they're going to get their own, whatever it is, right? Even we know that with the superstars, they often get their own. And some of them, if they turn out to be good-natured people, maybe they have a good end of their life, you know, that sort of thing. But he gets back to himself in 21 and 22. I was brutish. You know, I shouldn't have acted that way. He's not just saying, I can't wait till they crash and burn. He's saying, okay, no, I need a better perspective. And I was kind of brutish about it. And he's holding on to God. That there's that hope, like in 24. In 74, okay, so in 73, it's just like generic evil. I think of it like the superstars and the super rich, and they get to live it up, and here I am, I don't get to live it up. 74 is a little bit more specific on the problem. In 74, oh God, why have you cast us off forever? Look at verse 3. Lift up your feet unto the perpetual ruins, all the evil that the enemy has done in the sanctuary. Okay, this sounds like the sanctuary is a temple, and there's ruins, and they've done this evil. They've roared in the midst. They set up their own banners. Verse 4. I love the verse 5 makes me think of Lord of the Rings movies. They seemed as men that lifted up axes upon a thicket of trees, and now all the carved work thereof they've broken down with hatchet and this is the destruction of the temple. And so now he's taken just the general, I wish I had it as good as those bad people seem to get it. Now this is a real sin problem. This is an attack. This is trouble. Maybe people's lives, I would imagine people's lives are in danger, right? Verse 9, I'm going to start reading there. We see not our signs. There is no more any prophet. Neither is there any among us that knows how long. How long, O God, shall the adversary reproach? Shall the enemy blaspheme thy name forever? Why drawest thou back thy hand, even thy right hand? Pluck it out of thy bosom and consume them. Is this the same Asaph? Does it sound like the guy who wrote number 73? There's a lot of fire in him.
It's changed my mind if it is.
Yeah. So something's happened to the people, to the temple, to the city, and he wants God to act. And he feels pretty vindicated in this. Especially that second line in 10, shall they blaspheme your name forever? That's like David talking about Goliath, shall this uncircumcised Philistine. I think he even says blaspheme the army of the living God. He's not trying to take down Goliath so that he looks good. He's trying to take down Goliath because Goliath's insulting God. There's a similarity there with Asaph. How long? Where is your hand? It's like, why you got your hand in your pockets, God? Pull it out and slap him. Get him. And
Dan, what time frame would you place this on?
to me, this sounds like a destruction of the temple for real. So Babylon at some point. And so that's the trouble. There was an Asaph alive at the time of David, and David wrote Psalm 37, and ironically, 37 and 73 have a lot of similarities. And so I can imagine 73 was written by David's buddy Asaph, but then 74 must have been written to an Asaph that was either 400, years old, or another guy named Asaph. This sounds like captivity time.
Could it be prophecy
It could be. It could be.
written 950, but prophesying
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen?
It really could be.
I mean, David does.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. What the scholars seem to think that the Psalms, not all the books, but especially like 3, 4, and 5, they were collected in that time when they're all out scattered, and that's when the synagogues start to take place, right? The Pharisee tradition before they come back, that the Psalms seem to have been collected around that time because they have this very much strong theme of let's get back home, or let's think back to the temple. Not just the Psalms themselves, but like that path that I was talking about, books 3 and then 4.
That would be during Ezekiel's time, like
Mhm.
captivity.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. All right, so similar to 73, oh, everything's bad. Why is it worth being good? That's 73. This one, everything's bad. They're beating us up. Where's God? It's almost rude. God, pull your hand out of your pocket. It's almost like, why are you lazy? I don't think it's rude, but he's really calling on God. Would someone like to read the second half, 12 through 23? You don't have to if you don't want to. You got that? Go right ahead.
For God is my king, bold, working salvation in the midst of the earth. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength. Thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the water. Thou breakest the heads of the Leviathan in pieces, and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. Thou didst cleave the fountain and the flood. Thou driest up mighty rivers. The day is thine, the night is also thine. Thou hast prepared the light and the sun. Thou hast set all the borders of the earth. Thou hast made summer and winter. Remember this, that the enemy hath approached, O Lord, and that the foolish people have blasphemed thy name. O deliver not the soul of thy turtle dove unto the multitude of the wicked. Forget not the congregation of the poor forever. Have respect unto the covenant, for the dark places of the earth are full of the inhabitants of cruelty, the habitations of cruelty. Oh, let not the oppressed return shamed, let the poor and needy praise thy name. Arise, O God, plead thine own cause. Remember how foolish men reproaches thee daily. Forget not the voice of thine enemies, the tumult of those that rise up against thee increaseth continually.
All right. So I said in 11, I'm overemphasizing it possibly. God, why are you so lazy with your hand in your pocket? Get your hand out and do something about it. That's almost downright rude. And then, remember in the previous song, until I went to the sanctuary and I considered. It's almost like between 11 and 12, he's going to the sanctuary and considering. After he says possibly that God is lazy and leaving them to get beat up, what does he then talk about?
Exactly what God is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think he is insulting God or rude in 11, but it seems you can tell he's full of emotion. He's got, full of the feels, as they say. But God is the God of old. And then he said, thou didst, thou breakst, thou breakst, thou givest, thou didst, thou driedst. I love my old translation. All the, you did it, you did it, you did it, you did it. And what are the kind, the problem is, it sounds like somebody came in and destroyed the temple. So what stories does he tell? Now they've destroyed the temple. Before you did what?
Straightened the sea by your strength and shattered the heads of the sea monster in the water.
Yeah, it's like somebody stepped on my toe. God made foot, he's going, the scale is way high. It's almost like the parable. We owe, we're in debt 50 denarius. God is the one who could pay the 10,000 talents. He made the seas. He handled Leviathan. Now, I don't know when it was that God used Leviathan to feed the wandering wilderness people. That's probably just a poetic license there. But he provided meat for the people. He did all that to the rivers. He made the day and the night, put the sun and the moon and the stars up in it. And that's his perspective. He's all on fire because they burned God's temple. And he goes and he gets this perspective. God's done everything. What am I afraid of? It's kind of the image that I get.
Well, kind of said, especially in verse 11, made me think of the passage in Revelation where it said, how long? How long are you going to allow this?
Exactly. How long is one of my favorite lines in the Bible. Not because it means someone's in a bad mood, but it's because I'm not alone. I'm also thinking how long, and how long shows up in Psalms a lot. It's the souls under the altar. They're crying out to God, how long?
Yeah.
And the answer, do you remember what the answer is? A little while longer. Yeah. You expect the question, how long? The answer is, I'm going to save you right now. But that's not the answer they get.
That has got to be confusing though, in the sense of we can think of ourselves as we start to think of things, and I can't help but think of Deuteronomy 29:29.
Yeah.
That there's so much that we need to learn to accept.
Absolutely. So it's neat. He's fiery. He's angry at these bad guys. He said, God, where's your hand? You do your job. And then he talks respectfully about God. In 18 and 19 and 20, the request, I love it that the Psalms, requests and petitions of God are often written in the imperative, meaning this is the way parents talk to their kids, not kids talk to their parents, right? Remember this. Verse 18, deliver not the soul, forget not, have respect. But he's telling God, do the things that you do because you're God. Remember us, don't deliver us to the evil one, have respect to your covenant. I don't think he's thumbing his nose up at authority. He's simply saying the things that God himself does. But there's a lot of vigor there. So that's just, I'm gonna keep moving through, trying to see how many of these we're gonna look at. So there's fire. I don't like my problems. And then 74, there's fire. I don't like what they're doing. Get them. Why aren't you getting them yet? But you're big. You've done the things. When I went to think about their latter end, I had respect unto God. When I remember what God has done, so it's like he's using God to calm down all those heaving flames that he's dealing with. Then we get 75 and 76. They're both short in comparison. I mean, I can fit them both on one sheet of paper. We give thanks unto thee, O God. We give thanks, for thy name is near. Men tell of thy wondrous works. And then it seems like God starts speaking. When I shall find the set time, I will judge uprightly. So this is Asaph seemingly writing the words of God. Of course, God's also inspiring him, so it's all convoluted back and forth. But Asaph, who's been saying, where are you, God? Pull your hand out of your pocket and do your thing. He is now writing. It's almost like, if this is in order and should be a response, God says, I will do it. I am going to do this judging. The earth and all of its inhabitants are going to be dissolved. I've set up the pillars of it. So again, this is a pretty big perspective. God's the one, however you want to look at the earth, it's a rock flying through space. That's a scary thought. You know, God's the one who hung it on the thread, or God's the one who's built the pillars that are holding it up in the air, right? However you want to picture this. God's done that. He's going to judge. So don't be stiff-necked. Don't talk that way. He's talking to all these wicked people. God is the one who judges in verse 7. God has the foaming cup that he's going to make the wicked drink in verse 8. It's an ugly image. I'll read 9 and 10. I think this is Asaph is saying the I here. But I will declare forever, I will sing praises to the God of Jacob. All the horns of the wicked will I cut off. That I think it's God possibly again. All the horns of the wicked also will I cut off, but the horns of the righteous shall be lifted up. So Asaph is like, God is a judge. He does this. He's going to do it, and he's going to praise God. He's still pretty loud, but he's also loud for God. And then we get into 76. In Judah, God is known. His name is great in Israel. In Salem also is his tabernacle and his dwelling place in Zion. There he broke the arrows of the bow, the shield, and it goes into like the activities of God. But God is known. He's connected. Back then, you could literally go to where God would sit. No, you couldn't get all the way into the Ark of the Covenant, but the Ark of the Covenant was the seat. It was the mercy seat. It's where God would sit in mercy. And so, though I couldn't get all the way in there, I could go and look at the outside of the building holding where God sits. No matter what the troubles and the pains are in the world, I could be at least, I don't know the scale, 100 yards from God. Technically, we're closer than that at all times, but I imagine that would feel good. He's known, his dwelling place, and that's where he's done the good deeds of 3, 4, and 5. So, right? He's helped us. Verse 6, the horse and the chariot cast into dead sleep. End of verse 7. Who can stand when you're angry? Look at verse 9. When God arose to judgment to save the meek. So there's still a lot of destruction, and God is he's got the sword. He's, Asaph is all about get it done. He's a guy. Asaph's not a girl. Doing the stuff and the swords, and God's breaking the bad guys. And when he stands up to judge, verse 9, to save the meek. That's an interesting turn there. He's admitting that he's meek, or he's lowly, or he's a low person. There's a response there in 11 and 12. We need to make vows and keep our vows to God. This is a good God. He's a good judge. He's going to do these things. All right, so we just zipped through 73, 4, 5, and 6. Anything that's jumping out at you? We're kind of at a halfway point with this collection of Psalms. Sometimes it's hard to even know what to ask.
Dan?
Yeah.
It's not totally related to the message, that verse 2, 76. His tabernacle was in Salem, his dwelling place also in Zion. I think that's what they call parallelism.
Yes.
Hebrew. So you can equate Salem with Zion, and Zion is clearly Jerusalem. So you say, so what? Melchizedek was known as the king of Salem.
Yeah.
So that really locates him in the ancient city of Jerusalem.
Absolutely.
Some 2000 BC.
Yeah. That's a helpful passage for that. Yeah, it's another example of the rhyming idea. Even if the vowels and the consonants don't create a rhyme in English, the rhyme idea. Good connection. I like that. All right, let's have 2 readers. Who wants to read one? Oh, and actually, it breaks down perfectly. in the numbering. Who wants to read? I need somebody to read 1 through 10, and then somebody to read 11 through 20. And if nobody wants to read, I'm happy to read as well. I just like to let people jump in if they're interested.
77.
77. Yeah, I'm sorry. Psalm 77. Do you want to read part of it? Awesome. 1 through 10. Who wants to read 11 through 20? All right, in the back. Got it.
I cry aloud to God, hear me. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without weary. My soul refuses to be comforted. I remember God in the morning. When I meditate, my spirit faints. You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old, years long ago. I said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my spirit made a diligent search. Will the Lord spurn forever and never be favorable, and never again be favorable? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut off his compassion? Then I said, I will appeal to the years of the right hand most.
I shall remember the deeds of the Lord. Surely I will remember the wonders of old. I will meditate on all thy work and muse on thy deeds. Thy way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? Thou art the God who workest wonders. Thou hast made known strength among peoples. Thou hast by thy power redeemed thy people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph. The waters saw thee, O God. The waters saw thee. They were in anguish. The deeps also trembled. Clouds poured out water. Skies gave forth sound. The arrows flashed here and there. The sound of thy thunder was in the whirlwind. The lightnings lit up the world. The earth trembled and shook. The way was in the sea, and thy paths in the mighty waters, and thy footprints in the may not be known. Thou didst lead thy people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron.
Right. I really like this one. All the arrogant anger of 73, right? All the despairing anger about they've destroyed our temple in 74, and then he's working with the justice of God, and is God going to judge? 77 is very much a heartbreak psalm again. Reminds me of 73 and 74. In particular, and you did a really good job reading those questions in 7, 8, and 9. That's a dark moment, right? Will the Lord cast off forever? Favorable no more. Clean gone forever. Promise fail. Forgotten to be gracious. Shut up his tender mercy. All of those lines actually are, listen very slowly here, they're heretical ideas, because God has infinite of all these things. It's in Exodus 34, where God says, the Lord, I can't quote it right, gracious and quick to forget. Like he has those lists of what God is like. And Asa, in the middle of his despair, is saying, but is Exodus 34 not true anymore? Right? That's what he's experiencing. Peter watched Jesus get killed. The Apostle John was there seeing Jesus on the cross. Jesus's mom, when Jesus says, behold your son, I think he's pointing to himself. Look at your son up here on the cross. And I can imagine, are God's promises done? Did I believe for nothing? This is a crisis of faith people talk about. What are his emotions before he starts asking those questions? 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. We see what he's doing, and we can see a little bit of his emotion.
He's in trouble that he refuses to be comforted even.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, I'm back. It's going to be okay. No, it's not. And that's not necessarily just selfish. That's just You can't just pat me on the back and expect this loss to just be okay, right? Sorry, Joe.
No, but those thoughts are really, to me, something that helps me be honest with myself. You know, we try to deny our feelings sometimes a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and he's not doing that.
Yeah.
Really. And God is evidently allowing him to work through this.
Right. Right. So he's not saying false teaching. The questions reflect his struggle with the truth. Is the truth no longer true? Or here I am. These are the verses we need to know before our own personal crisis with faith, so that we can have godly words to walk us through it. We might not feel good as fast as Asaph does by the end of the psalm, but we can say, God, I know you're out there, but it sure doesn't feel like you're out there today. We have that kind of consternation. The man who had said to Jesus, if you just heal my son, and Jesus says, if I will, if I can. And all things possible to those who believe. And the man says the most human thing ever. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. That is about as human as it gets. I believe, but I also don't believe. We need God. And that's what's going on here. Yeah,
Heard some preachers say that the biggest obstacle that they run into for helping convert people is that bad things happen with people.
mm-hmm.
So in essence, that he's kind of saying it, that bad things happen to me, and that causes me to doubt whether God's there. So that happens to others, but also happens.
Amen. Amen. And sometimes people say, "Oh, I've heard from a couple different people. I can't go to church. Everyone's so good there." It's like, it's because they all took a shower and put on their nice clothes. That's why we all look good. And there's just that incorrect like, we're all a mess. We're all sad. We're not every moment sad, but we all have sorrows. We've all had losses. We're all at different stages of processing some of these feelings. He's complaining. Verse 3 is, I remember God and am disquieted. I know all of that. God saved people, but I don't feel. I'm not talking spiritual salvation, like physical. He's physically saved people, but I don't know if I'm going to get saved. Peter, when he was in jail and the angel comes in and lets him out, and Peter escapes, and Peter doesn't die by the hand of Jared, some guy named Jared, of Herod. What opened up Acts chapter 12? At the end of it, Peter escapes. Well, what happens at the beginning? James gets killed. What do you think about James's family? Why did James die, but God saved Peter? And I don't know what the answer is. James died, but Peter didn't. And these are all the hard things. These are hard things. Joe.
I guess, I never really looked at these Psalms and stuff like this before, but the one thing that comes to my mind is that this seems to be a fairly long process. Now, he's writing it down probably all at one time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I take it anyway. I don't know what you think about that, but it seems like this has got to be a little bit longer process. I don't get over those kind of things in a day myself.
I think you're right. And so, especially like when I made the comment about Psalm 73, until I went to church and I realized no, it's not that simple. But going to church is one of the long process things we do. We come to church and we feel sad. And by the end of it, well, it sure was good to be with my brothers and sisters. I'm still having a crisis of faith, but it's good to be with good. And that's one of the many things that we do. It's not like there's no quick fix. I think you're right. What he does, starting in 11, so that's where this divide was. It's nice that there's 20 verses, so we can divide it perfectly, 10 to 10. I will make mention of the deeds of the Lord. I will remember thy wonders of old. I will meditate also on thy work. I will muse on thy doings. It's almost like I'm on death row and I'm going to die and I'm not going to get out. And I don't think that's fair personally. But I'm going to remember what God did. And what does he remember? Wonders, strength, arm, saving the sons of Jacob and Joseph. And then starting in verse 16, you get the story. The waters saw thee, O God, the waters saw thee, and they were afraid. What story does he end up telling to himself? It's super clear by the time you get to verse 20. the Red Sea. He tells the story of the Red Sea in a really moving way. The waters saw you, O God, and you saved the people. Pharaoh didn't kill him. Pharaoh didn't enslave him again. You saved the people. Verse 19. Thy way was in the sea, and thy paths in the great waters, and your footsteps were not known. How many of the Israelites thought, with their backs to the Red Sea and Pharaoh coming at them at their face, how many of them thought, I bet God's going to give us a path through the water? You know, like, no, we're dead. And Moses lifts up his stick in the air and the water parts, and they all go, seriously? I would have been scared to go through. It's like, keep your arms up. I don't want the water. I don't know what it felt like. But that line, your path was in the sea. No one saw that coming. Peter's in jail, knowing James died, knowing he's going to die. And an angel lets him out. And it's not until the end he goes, I'm not dreaming. Like there's that moment where he just thought it was all a dream.
He was sleeping too.
Yeah. So Asaph here, he doesn't know if he's going to make it through, but he's going to tell this story to himself. God can do it. It's a little bit like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Our God is strong enough. He might not save us, but he's strong enough to save us. So we're not going to bow down. So I don't think you can say what they said until they've walked through 77 at some point in their life. It's pretty neat. His questions aren't false teaching, but you can see that you get like, oh my goodness, is he going to be a child of God? And I'm just going to remember the children's stories in the Bible, basically. They're not children's stories. That's what he's going to remember. All right, we don't have time to do 78, but 78 is fabulous. It's a sermon. It's about the toddlers in the wilderness.
We've just been studying that in the Walmart books. So
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well then you might take the time to read 78 on your own. It's a fun journey. There's a long introduction to the first 8 verses. It talks about how marvelous things he did in the sight of their fathers. Verse 13, he clave the sea and caused them to pass through. Verse 17, yet they went on to still to sin against him, to rebel against him. They tempted him. They asked for meat in their lust. They spoke against God. Verse 22, they did not believe in God. They didn't trust in his salvation. And it's just over and over. So God did this for them, and then they still sin. And so then God did this for them, and then they still sin. And then they did this for them, and they still. So it's just as violent and Asaph-y, loud vocabulary, but it's not about the bad guys out there. It's very much in the heart, in the middle of this whole section. It's about the bad guys in here. 78 is about how we are all kind of knuckleheads and we are the bad guys and we got to learn the lesson. And that's pretty neat because so far Asaph has been talking about them. And now it's about us. And so then in verse 79, we're not going to do much of this, but I'll do give a couple walk through these Psalms. In 79, remember the one about how they tore down the temple? Look at verse 1. O God, the heathen are come into thine inheritance. Thy holy temple they have defiled. So it's a similar problem. Verse 6. Oh, well, verse 5. How long will you be angry forever? There's the how long. Verse 6. Pour out your wrath on the heathen that know you not, upon the kingdoms that call not upon thy name. He's not just angry because they're ugly looking. He's angry because these are the people who don't know God. That's a step up. Verse 8, remember not against us the iniquities of our forefathers. He's talking about sin. Look at verse 9. Help us, O God of our salvation, for the glory of thy name, and deliver us and purge away our sins for thy name's sake. The problem isn't just the enemies took the temple. That's a problem. And we need that fixed, God. But don't count my dad's sin against me, which would be a big deal for them, right? There's a lot of history of that. And please take away my sin. It's moving in a better direction. 80. 80, Psalm 80, it's a really neat plea for help. Give ear, O shepherd of Israel. Jump down to verse 8. You brought a vine out of Egypt. You drove out the nations and planted it. You prepared room for it. It took deep root and filled the land. The mountains were covered with the shadow of it, and the boughs thereof were like the cedars of God. She sent out her branches unto the sea and her shoots unto the river. God, you took us out of Egypt and you planted us here. Why have you broken down our fences? The vine's getting ravaged. You did such good work with us. Will you help us? Verses 18 and 19. If you do this, so we shall not go back from thee. Quicken thou us, or enliven us, or revive us, and we will call upon thy name. Turn us again, O Lord God of hosts. Cause thy face to shine, and we shall be saved. So it's still talking about the trouble out there, but he's also including his own personal issues. And there's this lot of this, God, just shine your face. We'll trust in you. We'll hope in you. That verse 19 is a refrain. We see it in verse 3 and verse 7 and verse 19. Turn us again, O God of hosts, cause thy face to shine, and we shall be saved. It's interesting. He's saying a lot of the same ideas. And I don't know if he wrote the psalm in one day, right? In that one mood. But he's an older man writing these psalms, it's what it sounds like, or at least more mature. It could have, I don't know, maybe he grew up in a week, maybe it took him a week of, a week of years, I don't know. But it's sounding like his mind is getting in the better direction, even though there's a lot of trouble. Psalm 81 is praising God in the first 5 verses. I want you to see the transition in verse 5. Talking about God, he appointed it in Joseph for a testimony when he went out over the land of Egypt, where I heard a language that I knew not. I removed his burden, his shoulder from the burden. His hands were freed from the basket. Asaph is talking about he did this, and then halfway through verse 5, he says he becomes God. For the image here. And God went down into Egypt and he heard a language that he didn't know, and he saw Joseph suffering as a slave, and he's going to pull him out. God, who did so many good things for them. Verse 10, open your mouth wide and I will fill it, God says. And what does Asaph say that the people did in verse 11? They didn't. You're just a baby bird. Open your mouth and the mama bird will come and just shove it full of good food, like chewed up worms, which is gross. But all you got to do is open your mouth, you little Israelites. And God says in 11, but my people hearken not to my voice.
Like Malachi.
Yeah. Yeah. Verse 13, I still think this is God saying this. Oh, that my people would hearken unto me, that Israel would walk in my ways. That sounds like sad. Like God is sad and depressed, not Asaph. I'm sure Asaph is too. But it used to be Asaph, God, get your hands out of your pockets and do something. Now he's writing God. Oh, a lot like Jesus. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Man, I would have gathered you like a hen gathering her chicks, but you would not. So the tone is changed a little bit here. All right, let's see if we can do 2 more. Psalm 82 is beloved by many because of all the fights and debates. We're not going to get it. Verse 1, God stands in the congregation of the gods. He judges among the gods. How long will you judge unjustly? In verse 6, I said, you are gods and all you sons of the Most High. Some of your translations are just going to ignore the complicated thing and says he's going to judge among the princes or he's going to judge among the peoples. The literal word there is gods. And I think the point here is not that God is talking to other false deities or anything like that. I think he's talking to leaders and heads. And he's saying, you guys need to judge. And you need to be good princes and you need to be good rulers. And he's talking to them with the word gods. I don't think that the president is the God over me, but compared to with what he can get done with what I can get done internationally, I mean, okay. If God calls him a god in comparison to my lowly state, I'm not going to be too upset. This is about how they need to do justice and help the lowly and help the destitute and do these right things. This is like what every prophet talks about. And the failure of those heads of state or what have you is like the failure of gods. And Asaph, he's been talking so long about the enemy out there, and he's moving into our responsibility in here. And it seems to be probably the responsibility of those who were leaders, religious and political leaders. Jesus quotes this in John 10:34. And Jesus uses the God word there. And so Jesus didn't have any, I think it's a figure. I think it's a figure of speech. And then we can close by looking at 83. I think there's another psalm or two of Asaph elsewhere in the whole book of Psalms, but this is the last in this string. I'll just go ahead and read this. Psalm 83. O God, keep not thou silence, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemy has made a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They take crafty counsel against thy people. They consult together against thy hidden ones. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. Against thee do they make a covenant. The tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, Philistia and the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria also is joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot. Do unto them as unto Midian, as to Sisera, as to Jabin at the river Kishon, which perished at Endor. They became as dung for the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb, yea, their princes like Zebah and Zalmunna, who said, let us take to ourselves in possession the habitations of God. O my God, make them like a whirling dust, as stubble before the wind, as the fire that burns the forest, as the flame that settles the mountains of fire. So pursue them with thy tempest, and terrify them with thy storm. Fill their faces with confusion, that they may seek thy name, O Lord. Let them be ashamed and dismayed forever, yea, let them be confounded and perish, that they may know that thou alone, whose name is Jehovah, art the most high over all the earth. So the whole set of Psalms ends with a psalm. It's an imprecatory psalm. God, judge the bad guys. And he literally lists their names. So does this sound like a weird ending? Does it sound like he's gone back to his mood at the first? Or is there a difference here? What do you think about it? I'm asking an opinion question, so we're all going to be wrong. Don't worry.
It sounds to me like it fits, but again, this is my first time through these like this, but it still seems to fit to me.
I agree. It surprises me when he says, get them, and he lists their names. That seems kind of ugly. But Jesus said things that sounded ugly to people. I don't think they were ugly, but they sounded. When Jesus said to the rich young ruler, sell all you have and give to the poor and follow me, that probably sounded ugly to him. What does Asaph say about himself or his own feelings or his own needs? I can't find him anywhere in this psalm. And that's totally different. There is verse 3, they take crafty counsel against thy people. They consult together against thy hidden ones. So he would be one of them. But it's not about Asaph. It's not about they destroyed my church building. They destroyed my temple. It's like Asaph isn't in the picture anymore. And whatever trouble was going on at the beginning in Psalm 73 and 74, he's still talking about that trouble. But it seems like it's righteous, the righteous indignation. God, you do what is right. There are wicked people out there, and God needs to destroy them. I think. I know of rape and abuse. I know people that have been hurt that way, and their lives will never be fixed. because you can't fix that. And there are people out there who did that. And they need to be punished.
And even at that, though, he's still asking you, so to cover their faces with shame so they might seek you, O Lord.
Isn't that amazing?
So instead of just wishing that they were completely destroyed, it's like, maybe they'll come to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Now if they murdered somebody, they need to stay in jail. But God bless them if they turn to God.
Yeah.
Right? This is amazing. This is my favorite imprecatory psalm. There's some that are more violent and more rough, where you're dealing with all the pain inside and you want your abuser to go down. This one is the one that makes me then look at those others. And I use that line in particular, verse 16, fill their faces with confusion that they may seek thy name. That's the line I keep with me when there are those who are lost that I'm praying for, or those who ought to be Christians and are instead hurting and become enemies of Christians in all sorts of different kinds of ways. That's the line that I keep in my mind, because I love that. Fill them with confusion, mess them up, so that they'll seek thy name. And I think that that's very hopeful.
I think some people think wanting justice or wanting the wrong to be corrected or wanting the bad guys to pay for their, bad guys as in men and women, I'm not saying just guys make mistakes. They, people think that when we want that, we're showing hatred or not showing love towards one another. But if we're doing it for this sake, like 16 through 18 says, that make them see the consequences, make them deal with the judgment so that they do have a chance to come back to you. I think that's the greatest love we can show.
That's absolutely right.
Other people. And I feel like we need to be very careful to automatically place judgment on someone who wants justice because they want justice. If they want justice for the right reason, not just for that person to suffer, but for them to learn from those mistakes, then are we not showing God's love to those people?
I think that that's right. I think that that's absolutely right. This enters into one of the to me, understanding the words of the Psalms can be hard enough. But then if we get into that, then we're going to find the Psalms that are the imprecatory Psalms. There's the one, make them like slug when salt's poured on it. And that's gross. Make them be like stillborn. I mean, there's some rough things in there. And Jesus says, love your enemy. And those things seem like polar opposites. And it's our job to figure out, God said them both somehow. How do we work with that? A lot of people think that grace and works are polar opposites. But we're only going to be there with God's grace, and we got to work. We need to figure out how to make those kinds of things that seem against each other to be together. What I've done is the people, if somebody is overcritical of someone else who's looking for justice, my guess is they don't know injustice. And in our country, it's pretty easy to live without knowing much injustice. Certain minorities, certain neighborhoods, you're going to know it better than others. A lot of the Psalms is, God, I need somebody to hear me. I need somebody to judge for me. It's because the widows would never be represented in court and that sort of thing. There's lawyers all over the place who will represent us in court. They've got billboards all over the place. We can fight for justice. And so we live in a little bit of a different society. And I think it was harder back then. But if you've been harmed, or if your loved one has been harmed by another, then you know what that pain is like, and you've got to figure out how to process it. I think Asaph is a great journey to figure out, how do I not hate the world, and even possibly, how do I deal with my feelings about God right now as I'm dealing with the struggle? And Asaph's really encouraging and helpful for that. All right, so that was a little long, but I hope that was enjoyable. If you ever have any questions or anything about the Psalms, I'd be happy to try to help you out with that again sometime. Thank you.
And